Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DTC Perspectives Talking Health. Today's session, Creative Strategy in the Age of AI, is sponsored by Eversana in Touch, and we're so glad that you're joining us today. We'll also be hosting a live Q&A at the end of today's discussion, so please feel free to submit your questions at any time using the chat or the QA features in your webinar window. Now to kick off the conversation, I'm pleased to introduce our speakers, Dan Gandor and John Kinney of Eversana in Touch, and Rich Palazzoli of Sobi.
Thank you, Caitlin. Appreciate the intro there. And thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar today. Excited to be having this discussion with my colleague, John, and our friend, Rich Palazzolo from Sobi. To kick things off, the title of this webinar is Cutting Through the Noise, Creative Strategy in the Age of AI. And I was thinking about this and wanted to start with a bit of a paradox because I see AI as making it easier. We all see this as making it easier than ever to create content, but it's also making it harder than ever to be heard. I saw a 2025 HubSpot study that found that 42% of marketers say that AI-driven content has doubled the noise in their channels over the last year. And so this doesn't seem to be a volume problem anymore. It's a meaning problem. It's not about creating more content. It's about creating more meaningful content that gets amplified and scaled through AI. And so I want to start this conversation, and today isn't going to be a didactic presentation. It's going to be really a three-way conversation between John, Rich, and I. But we're talking about AI in the context, and I want to start by talking about it in the context of strategy creation. Maybe before we do that, I just want to kind of say I lead omnichannel and digital transformation at Eversana in Touch. John Kinney is our Chief Strategy Officer, and Rich Palazzolo is the Executive Director of CX and Advanced Commercial Capabilities at Sobi. And so you've got three people who live and breathe strategy, omnichannel, customer experience, and of course, all of us are leveraging AI in our daily lives and in our work lives more and more. And so back to AI in the context of strategy creation. We're all using AI to be our proofreader, our thought partner, our co-creator, sometimes even outright author, but don't tell anybody. So I guess I'll ask you, gentlemen, where do you see the most opportunity with leveraging AI to craft and refine strategy?
I think the thing for me, Dan, is one of the biggest challenges that brands have is frequently to be too brand centric. We want to communicate our RTBs to an audience, but especially when we're developing brand campaigns, the goal of those campaigns is really to try and prime people before they enter the category. So when they do, they recognize and respond to our performance marketing. And if you're just throwing RTBs at people before they're actually interested, they're going to disengage. What AI allows us to do, especially on the research side, is start thinking about patients more holistically. What are they really interested in before they enter the category? And where's the opportunity for real audience insight? What's going on in their lives that we can connect the brand to? And I think if you start with real insight-based campaigns, you're going to have campaigns that actually attract attention rather than try and buy their way in to grabbing people's attention.
John, I love what you said there about that because I feel like the insights, if I think about the places where AI can help us, I think about creating clarity. So helping us really see patterns where we can't catch that manually. Where are we seeing referral patterns, digital behaviors, different insights that we can grab to help us better craft story and make sure that we are really thinking about our patients, our HCPs and customers as a whole. The other piece I was thinking too is around agility, like really giving us that opportunity to be more dynamic in the sense of, we don't have to wait for quarterly reviews or we don't have to wait for an annual assessment and thinking we actually have much more information at our disposal much more quickly. So being ready to use that on a much more regular basis. And I think that's going to be, especially in rare disease, that's something we haven't had in a long time. So getting us that information to drive those insights to be able to move more quickly is really where I see the largest opportunity for us in AI.
I love the fact that we're all kind of highlighting and anchoring still on the human side of it. AI
Right.
is a way for us to cull through the mountains of data or find patterns and insights that we wouldn't have seen otherwise, but it's still to serve humans and to have that empathy through through everything that we're doing. And as an omnichannel marketer, I think that's our goal, right? Is to be data driven, to personalize that experience, and to create an experience with a capital E, not just barfing out our marketing message. And I think that's where I think we're all, I think, in vehement agreement that AI allows us to get to that depth and get to that empathy and maintain the humanness out of all this, right?
In many ways, the irony is AI allows us to bring in the patient, especially in rare, to the center of all conversations. It used to be we might do research or once a year, twice a year, and the rest of the year we're going on our gut, or we're going on worse what we remember from the research a year ago. Now we can actually create like patient avatars and make them participants in the marketing conversation every day. So I think the irony is that AI honestly gives us the potential to make marketing more human-centric.
Love it. I want to make sure we weave in practical tips for the audience here today. And back to this question of just with leveraging AI to craft and refine strategy, I was thinking about, where our team, at least at Eversana in Touch, our omni-channel strategists are using AI every single day. We've created numerous agents to pull research and cull through input source documents from your team, John, the upstream brand planners and strategists, even from our media strategy team, take those media plans and then kind of be able to triangulate and more easily craft omni-channel strategies, touch point maps, message maps, things of that sort. I know at Eversana, we also have the AI agency, which we've created agent gardens that mirror our major teams. The upstream strategy folks that sit in brand impact with you, John, our omni-channel strategists on my team, as well as our downstream content creation, delivery, and deployment folks that sit in our factory, also on my team. So I guess any other kind of elements where you see practical uses of AI for crafting and refining strategy that you guys want to highlight?
I think for me, the opportunity to bring AI to MLR has really made us operate far more efficiently because again, you're now in a position where you can start evaluating, is this insight, is this messaging strategy going to pass the mustard with your MLR team? Because essentially we can create agents that evaluate messages based on their propensity to fit or go outside those recommendations. So again, that's one of those things where it's changing how we work, where MLR is just part of the process now versus at the end of the process, and thereby causing us to have to, if we're wrong, go back and start all over again.
Yeah, that's been a great one, and definitely one that's a little more upstream is that we've been using is around synthetic market research, which I think is a really interesting and powerful tool to leverage in the strategy component and in the creative process too, where we can basically create, synthetic copies of HCPs and patients, and run market research, messaging research, creative research, other types all in the matter of, literally hours versus weeks and months at a fraction of the cost. And what we've done with this is use it more, it's more of an accelerator than a replacement for traditional market research. We're not replacing talking to actual humans and customers because there's so much that you can gain from that. But what we are using it for is one, it helps us maybe refine the messaging, refine the content before we put it into market research. And that's been something that we've had a lot of success with, and we're seeing about an 80% accuracy when we put it through synthetic versus traditional market research. So that's been something that's helped us, one, accelerate, strengthen, and helped open up even more creativity, I would say, as we've been using that pretty frequently.
Very cool. Love the segue there, and I want to continue our conversation by talking a little bit about more like content at scale. There's the speed aspect of it, and now there's the explosion of just more. And we know that AI makes it really easy to create stuff, lots of stuff, and if done right, hopefully we're creating the right message for the right person at the right time and in the right vehicle. If done wrong, I'm hearing it called AI slop. And even I saw a report from Google's Search Liaison team that really talked about the AI generated low effort content, that's what they call it, is degrading search quality, and it's forcing them to change their algorithm. And their threat analysis group said that they're actually seeing an explosion of that low quality, mass produced AI content online. And I think we're starting to see it as well. So I guess the question to you is kind of digging even deeper. But as brands rush to scale efficiently and efficiency, sometimes it's at the cost of insight or at the cost of emotion. And so as we talk about content and creative at scale, just wanted to get your thoughts on how we balance that.
Yeah, I can go first here, John. And it's back to what both of you have mentioned. It's that human connection. I think that is so important because efficiency without insight is really just noise, right? We're just pumping out more content, more emails, more anything without real human insight behind it. You're making the customer experience worse. You're creating noise that's unnecessary. And AI doesn't fix that. It really exposes it more. So to me, emotion's still that differentiator. And we know that physicians and patients are overwhelmed. AI can help us understand what truly resonates, but then it's about the human element of bringing empathy to the story. So that AI plus human element is just so critical to make sure that we aren't just creating content to create content.
I agree, Rich. And I would add that I think one of the things that AI demands of marketers is a lot more discipline because you can put out a lot of messages, because you can infinitely version your brand campaign doesn't mean you should. For us, the focus is, hey, what are the critical messages for key segments, for key parts of the audiences? Repetition can be your friend in terms of ensuring those messages break through. And if you want to get not just attention, but branded attention, the less that you're changing your brand campaign, the more you're creating a creative system where you've got really strong elements of the brand, not just a logo, but a whole visual audio design, so that no matter when people see a message from you, they know it's from you. That requires a little bit of restraint from the marketers of not updating the brand campaign every time the sales team says they're getting bored of it. The only people who really get bored of brand campaigns is internal audiences. The more they see it, the more they recognize it, the more your performance marketing is going to do well. So I think part of the challenge of AI is it allows us to do so much. It requires self-discipline.
I also think there's the macro, there's the big side of it, with campaigns. And to your point, John, far too often we as marketers have that fatigue with a campaign, but the average customer, be it an HCP or a patient, only sees our touches our brand, sees that campaign a handful of times at most. And so they're not getting that fatigue first and foremost. And so it's not about using AI to create the big stuff. I actually was going to go smaller. I think, and especially as we preach personalization, it doesn't need to be this big, complex thing. I know I've worked in, many of my previous companies want to get hyper complex and sophisticated with who gets what, when, and where, and what message, and how it tweaks. And I'm like, sometimes it's as simple as the imagery matching one's demographics or the city they're from. And I think it's those little elements that tell the customer we're listening, and we're quote unquote listening. We're cognizant of who you are, and you're not just getting the same message as everyone else. And that sort of personalization, first off, doesn't require super deep data. I mean, these are demographic things. Two, this is before where you wouldn't shoot a commercial in 17 cities or whatever, but now we can create that background of Chicago skyline versus Boston or New York, in a snap. Or again, having images that look like that doctor's patient set instead of just our random patients that we have for the main campaign. So I guess I love the fact that, first of all, I agree that we don't need to have the massive personalization in campaign, but sometimes personalization can be in the simplest of ways, and AI just makes that so much easier.
I think that underscores John's point around discipline again, right? Like, yes, we have the tools to do many things now, and at the scale that we've been talking about for years and years. But how do you do it that makes the most sense for the brand? It's like the same with AI. I think people very quickly are like, oh, let's AI that. But why? What is the problem we're trying to solve? And if we start there, I think all that discipline starts to fall into place nicely.
Love it. Let's keep getting into specifics and real use cases here. I actually saw, again, AI is making content creation effortless, sometimes maybe too effortless. I saw a TikTok 2025 Creative Insight Report that showed that AI enhanced creative appears in more than 60% of ads on their platform. And of course, TikTok as a platform is huge. So I'm curious, how have you guys seen AI unlock either new creative possibilities or maybe new creative challenges for your teams or agency partners?
I think for us, one of the first kind of most exciting opportunities that AI opened up for was really expanding the use of KOLs. It used to be you'd shoot a KOL once a year. Some of them aren't the most charismatic, camera-friendly people. And honestly, this isn't their job. They're not in the world of presentation. But with AI, we can capture their likeness, we can capture their voice, and with their approvals, update their talking points so that our KOLs become always on influencers. And it really kind of changes what you can do with KOLs, moving it from just one big KOL message once a year down to like micro KOLs. So you're talking to HCPs with influencers within their community. So I really do think it's opening up the whole influencer space in a way that gives pharma marketers control over what the influencers are saying in a way that the influencers can sign off on too.
Yeah, John, I want to do that here. So we're excited to learn more and dive into that. I think for us, we haven't gotten too far into creative execution with AI, but we are excited to. And a lot has been on the upfront or in the process pieces. But I think the other piece we're starting to dabble into is around personalization, back to like what makes the most sense and how do we do that at the scale that's appropriate for our audiences and our disease states. And maybe one of the challenges I think we're faced with as we start to evaluate these types of pieces, it's like with great power comes great responsibility. It's the kind of capability gaps in change management that we need to instill across our teams, across, our marketing teams to make sure that they're upskilled and understand the capabilities that are available, our MLR teams, our executive teams, really across the board, to understand how we can leverage this and make sure that people feel comfortable and confident in the approach and also recognize, that this isn't always a silver bullet. So can we pilot? Can we create that test and learn mentality on this before we go too far too fast? And that's been something I think we've had really good success in is starting small, trying, piloting, seeing what works, what doesn't work. If it doesn't work, what did we learn and how do we move forward? I think that's the big piece that we're trying and we need to instill across all our teams and with our partners.
Love it. And I think that's a perfect segue to kind of this next section where, as the omni-channel guy, I want to talk about how we're trying to create holistic cross-channel, cross-all-channel campaigns that live and breathe and optimize in real time. This is my utopia. And this shouldn't be about optimizing for simple metrics like reach, but we're targeting impact and targeting outcomes. And so I want to ask you guys, like, what does an outcomes ready or content at scale campaign look like for brands? How do we connect data, content, and creative to really drive impact and let us optimize against that?
Yeah, I think for us, the content at scale isn't about just like we've been talking about. It's not about just producing more. It's about really producing with purpose. And we've been taking a deep look at these outcomes ready campaigns and meaning, what every piece of content is tied to a behavior that we want to influence, a signal we can measure, or an experience that feels consistent in humans. So to do all this, you really have to start with the data. And I'm very lucky to have a really powerful data science and digital measurement team here who is incredibly passionate about this. And we're not, we talk about it's not always the most glamorous work, although I have talked to the team about we need to change that,
Mhm.
how we say that because you know what? This is pretty glamorous work because it is getting us to the end result of where we've all been trying to get to. That's my little soapbox moment. But we're talking about, taxonomy, metadata, and data structures, which can be complicated and are not what everybody wants to talk about every day. But we know that without that foundation, we cannot get to the truly personalized, dynamic content that will ultimately drive the business outcomes. So we have created a bit of a process that we focus on that I was thinking might be helpful to share with the group that's listening. So one is, starting with identifying a clear behavior or outcome that we're trying to drive to. That's paramount. Mapping our content to the customer needs, identifying the data signals that can trigger the right content, less guessing, more responding to what we see or what is happening, working with the agencies and the brands to get to creative that's insight-led, not channel-led, and then creating a feedback loop so that we're constantly learning and adapting over time. And I think AI is helping us speed that up. The data is helping to steer us, but the strategy and the discipline, like John was mentioning, keeps everything connected as we move forward. And that's really our main focus as we get into this omni-channel mentality.
And on the brand side, Dan, we think of like content velocity and content at scale a little differently, but it's also kind of a fundamental shift. Increasingly, we're preparing for a world where every brand, no matter how small, will be able to have a brand campaign. It used to be that a small biotech, they'd have a website, they'd have an IVA, they couldn't afford a production shoot. However, with AI making production and targeting relatively easy, they can afford a creative team, strategic consultation to develop their own campaigns in their local areas. And so we're expecting to see far more players in our categories, not just from other brands, smaller biotechs, but also HCP offices, hospitals putting out their perspectives on the categories we're in. So we're actually expecting a lot more noise that we're going to be keep competing with moving forward.
Yeah, and I see that as well. Obviously, we both see that being at the same company, but it's not just the amount of noise that's out there. I also think it's the amount and the speed of that noise, because now with so many different competitors and everybody being able to create so much, we have to be able to iterate and change our campaigns week over week,
Yeah.
whereas maybe before it was year over year, barely at that. And that's a big thing. And Rich, I'm with you. That's where, the more you have the fundamentals down, the boring stuff, the tagging, dynamic resizing, testing, predictive creative, all that stuff, the more that's behind the scenes and running smoothly, the more we can actually do the good stuff when it actually outputs towards customers. But you've got to have the back end fundamentals right. And that's another one where a lot of our teams have to continue to evolve to be ready for that. Cool. As we're getting closer to the end here, again, I want to keep it as practical and useful for the audience as possible. So if we're advising another brand that's just starting their AI creative journey, what's the one thing you'd tell them?
Rich, you go first.
Okay. I would say, and I stole my thunder on this a little bit earlier, but I think it's start with the problem, not the technology. What are we trying to solve for? And this is where we've run into challenges as a company and where I see others struggle the most is we're chasing this idea of AI because that's what we're told we need to be doing right now versus starting with the problem. Because what are we trying to solve for the customer? What behavior am I trying to influence? What insight am I trying to unlock? So my advice there would be don't start with the AI, start with the outcome, and then let's leverage AI to make the outcome smarter, faster, more creative.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think certainly for those of us within the marketing end of organizations, AI fundamentally, I think will empower us to be more market oriented. Like, how do we turn our focus away from internal factors to what are the problems our audiences are facing? How do we solve their problem? I think if we start with an understanding of our audiences, and AI can really help. To Rich's point, it really opens up the whole world of synthetic research. We're just going to be starting from a stronger place.
I agree with you both. And for me, and you're right, Rich, it's don't be the hammer looking for the nail. Like AI is just a tool and it's an accelerant, but it's an accelerant to something better, to an actual strategy, an actual goal. And we've got to always have that front and center versus AI for AI's sake. That's probably where you end up with AI slop if done wrong. So I think that's my biggest learning is keep focusing on the fundamentals, for sure. So last question, and then we'll open it up for Q&A from the audience. But in 2026. So we're only just a couple days away, weeks away from the new year. So I want to complete this sentence. In 2026, the best marketing will be blank.
I think the best marketing will be faster. I actually think a lot of what undermines marketing is just the amount of time we spend on internal deliberations. And the faster we can produce content, which AI allows us to do, develop hypotheses, which AI allows us to do, and actually put it into market, that's the best decider in terms of if it's a good idea or a bad idea. So I'm really hoping we can learn by doing versus debating in 2026.
Yeah, maybe layering onto that, I think the best marketing in 2026 will be adaptive. So that learning in real time, that adjusting based on what's actually moving behavior, will be really critical and blending that, human insight and AI-powered precision to get to faster, smarter, and hopefully better.
All right. I know it's unfair because I get to go last and hear your thoughts, but for me, I mean, for me, it's summing it up in the word of the best marketing will be truly omnichannel. And of course, parentheses, personalized, data-driven, iterative, and iterating for outcomes. I think that's what it's all going to be about. And I think 2026 is going to be a year where there's a bit of an omnichannel renaissance. It's going to be a year where we see it done right because it's enabled with AI for the first time. Maybe I'm not going to say ever because there's certainly been ways to do this without full AI, but I think at scale and mass, it's going to be a pretty exciting year. So with that, I'd love to take some questions from the audience. Caitlin, I don't know if you had any in chat or how we want to do this here, but happy to answer any questions from the crowd.
Hi, Dan. Yes, we do have one question. I just want to remind our audience to, if you have any questions, please submit it through the Q&A tab. Also, under the resources tab, you can download this slide deck, which has John and Dan's information to request a strategy session with them as well. The first question that we have is, as AI makes week over week changes easier, how do you keep the creative ecosystem stable? And what frameworks help ensure story first sequencing so RTBs don't appear too early? Do you recommend specific guardrails around pre and in market work?
That's a big topic. I'll say, and actually, it's a really important one. And we talked about it. It makes changing easy. That doesn't mean you should always be changing. And so, what we would recommend is really developing not creative execution. Think about it as creative platforms, creative systems that can operate in CTV, can operate in TikTok, can operate in Facebook. But essentially, you're creating a system that allows you to create for those platforms, but that it has enough branding. And by branding, I don't mean just a logo. I mean a whole creative system, audio, distinctive visuals, characters, celebrities, really making sure that every frame of every video that you put out there, your brand is coming through incredibly clearly. It's probably one of the biggest issues that we find is that almost 40% of pharma brands ads, people don't get the right brand. So it's a huge issue. It has been an issue for a long time. AI makes it even more of an issue. It's about creative systems.
Yeah, I'll echo that. And I think, we need to realize that people aren't engaging with every single one of our tactics. Matter of fact, if they only engage with one or two of our channels, like that's great. But how do you make sure those one or two feel like four or feel like five? And to that point, you got to make sure that you've got a flexible framework system that enables that, but also recognizing you just got to get your main value proposition out there. And so it's not about every single reason to believe and every message you want to say. I know we have a tendency to just want to, again, puke it out there, but we've got to get down to what moves people. And if we know the right place where people are engaging, and the more we know about them, then we can actually tailor that main value proposition to what's going to change their behavior.
Think, just it's kind of getting back to the basics a little bit and like think putting some of that time up front to really create the foundation, create the platforms as needed. So that way, once you get into execution, they are running and then you can test and learn and obviously report back. But I think selling ourselves short on that time that's going to take up front can be dangerous. Like we have to take that time and make sure that we're planning and thinking through all the options here.
Cool. Caitlin, any other questions?
That is all the questions that we have from our participants currently. I would just like to thank you all so much for coming and attending. Let me stop sharing this. Again, I just wanted to reiterate to our attendees to go to the resources tab to get John and Dan's information to book a strategy session with Eversana in Touch. And thank you all so much for all attending, and we hope to see y'all again soon.
Thank you all. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Take care.
Thank you. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thanks, Caitlin. Thank you all.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.